politics, they go together like what you would say, Ackee and Saltfish, fish and bammy. Well, anyway you check it, whenever a new poll is published during election season, it causes a whole heap of debate, whole heap of discussion, and we're going to be continuing that this evening. Thanks so much for joining us. This is All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. And later on in the program, we're going to be hearing from the General Secretaries of both the People's National Party and the Jamaica Labour Party. But first, pollster Don Anderson joins us in this segment to walk us through what we've been finding out. As always, Don, thank you so much for coming in. Great to have you.
Thank you very much, Dion. Good to be on your program.
Just remind us, first of all, very quickly of the methodology.
We interviewed 1,201 persons across the island in every parish. It's a nationally representative sample, which means that from that sample we can project to the population accurately. And fieldwork dates were January 31st through to February 13th.
Now,
all persons 18 years and over who are registered to vote.
Right, so it's not just random people who have an opinion, you have to be on the voters list.
Absolutely.
You know, I know explaining polling can take hours and hours. We don't have hours and hours, but people do ask questions whenever we have poll results published. And one of the questions they asked is, how can you predict national trends or national intentions from a sample of 1,200 people?
There's several ways to answer that particular question. But effectively, over the years, we have perfected the technique of utilizing a 1,200, 1,400 sample to arrive at what people are saying and then be able to project that, because we use a nationally representative sample, which means that sample that we use is reflective of the overall population. And therefore, when we talk in terms of margin of error, we are confident that utilizing that 1,200 sample, we will get data which is within plus or minus 3 percentage points at the 95% confidence level, which means we're 95% confident that the data we get using that method of having a nationally representative sample, and I stress the word representative, because numbers are important, but the more important factor in determining the accuracy of a sample is how representative and how reflective it is of the population. So that's a critical determinant.
And another question I get every time we have a poll published is, but Dion, nobody never interviewed me yet. No pollster never asked me no question yet. Where are they? Are they really out there?
You know, some people think it's a facetious answer. But when people, and I get asked that question every day.
I can imagine.
Every day. And I say, you know, when we interview 1,000 to 1,200 persons, there are 2,799 people who don't get interviewed. You happen to be one of those, but eventually. And I'm always happy when somebody stops me on the road and says to me, somebody came to my house yesterday and interviewed me. But the bottom line is, you're picking a sample of the population. And, you know, if you had time and all the money, you could do 10,000, 50,000 people. You don't. So you utilize a sample which is carefully drawn, carefully designed, and which is representative of the population from which it is chosen. And then you can make that projection accurately.
All right, so let's get to some of the results now. And one of the interesting things for me is the leader approval ratings. And I say this because what we have this time around is a returning Prime Minister in his second consecutive term now, up against a new leader of the People's National Party who has never faced a general election, who has never led his party in a general election. So we're kind of starting from scratch after the September 2020 election in terms of seeing where Mark Golding would be going, where Andrew Holness would be going and stacking up against each other. And because Golding in particular was coming from really, really low approval ratings because I guess he was new.
Absolutely, absolutely. When Golding took over from Peter Phillips, his ratings were very similar to what Peter Phillips's was, which was in the 18, 17, 16 range. Not good. At the same time, the leader of the government, Andrew Holness, his ratings were in the 40s and 50s. So there's a huge gulf between how they were perceived nationally. We've seen over the years between, say, 2020 and 2023, because more persons were now becoming accustomed to talking, to seeing Mark Golding, that his ratings moved up gradually. More people became aware of who he was, what he stood for perhaps. And by about 2022, his ratings were looking not as good as Wholeness's, but fairly decent. 23, 24, 25, 26, 28. During the 2023, late 2023 and 2024 period, his ratings actually were almost on par with Wholeness's. And therefore, over the passage of time, more and more persons were able to embrace Mark Golding and sort of understood who he was. And from that perspective, his ratings actually improved over time.
Yeah.
Over time.
If I put some actual figures to that, in 2021, for instance, he was 2% good, 9%.
There you go.
I beg your pardon, 2% very good, 9% good. So that's 11%
positive.
Right. And then in terms of his negatives, they were 31% poor, 16% very poor, which is 47%. And then if you look at September 2024 now, at that point, he was actually, let's see, ahead of Wholeness.
By about 3 percentage points.
Right, 5 I think this is. He was at 33 total positives, Wholeness was at 28. In this current poll that we're talking about, the most recent though, we've seen him drop. His approval points have dropped, total positive 10%, while Wholeness has picked up 5%. But what do we know in terms of what's happening there?
Well, the September poll was conducted shortly after the PNP's party conference, in which, by all appearances, he made a fantastic presentation to the country, and I think right after that we did a poll. His ratings went up, the party's ratings went up, and I mean to carry the discussion a little further. When we looked at the parish council elections in February, for example, where we had the party separated by 1 percentage point. By April, the PNP was 7 percentage points ahead, and right after the party conference, 9 percentage points. So there's a lot of benefit coming out of the party conference, which was, again, also something that we found with his ratings going up almost in line with the PNP's overall rating. So that was one of the key factors. And when you go down 4 months from September to now, January, February, what happened was that it appears, based on the fall off of the ratings for Golding.
Let's just bring up Golding's ratings here so the viewers can see them while you talk.
Sure, okay. So when you look at that, it seems as if the PNP took its foot off the pedal, because they were obviously in the driving seat in terms of the momentum was with the People's National Party. But between September 24 and January, February 25, when we did the next poll, it appears as if they'd taken the foot off the gas, and therefore they slipped significantly, because fewer people were able to give them a positive rating than in September, for example.
This is a party now you're speaking
The party
of.
and the leader, because both of them fell during the same period.
Right.
All right? And we're not saying the two are necessarily directly related, but they definitely both fell at the same time, between September 24 and January, February 25.
Okay. And then, of course, the big one now, the party standings in terms of what we're seeing there. Of course, 20 and 21, 22, you're not as focused because we're so far from an election.
Right.
What we're seeing there is a lot of people saying, as usual, they won't vote and so on. But by the time we come to now 23, 24, 25, people start to look up. So we've been seeing now, we saw in, what is this now? January 24, they were in a dead heat, right? JLP 24%, PNP 23%. And then we saw in October 2024, or September it was, we did it, 2024, we saw the PNP 9 points ahead of the JLP.
Correct.
And this latest poll now, the gap has narrowed, and they're now just about, PNP now just about 5 points ahead. So tell me what we're seeing.
Well, let's go back a bit, because we have a long series of data going all the way back to 2018.
Right.
And between 2018 and 2022, we did about 7 national polls, and none of those national polls was the People's National Party anywhere near the Jamaica Labour Party. As a matter of fact, during 2019, 2020, the Jamaica Labour Party was 16 percentage points ahead. This is almost a record, all right?
And we saw that in the 2020 election.
Exactly.
When they wiped out the PNP.
Exactly. I mean, there's a, I must say this, a direct correlation almost between what we find in terms of polls immediately prior to an election and the way the election turns out. Because I'm saying so because during the 2020 poll that we did, I indicated 16 percentage points was the difference between the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party. The election result, 49-14, all right? Between 2020 and 2022, the difference was about 10 percentage points in favor of the Jamaica Labour Party. As a matter of fact, on average, between 2018 and 2022, the Jamaica Labour Party led by 10 percentage points. As you indicated, by the time we got to the parish council elections in February of 2024, that gap had been closed significantly. The gap was 1 percentage point in favor of the Jamaica Labour Party. What was the result of the local government election? Dead heat. The People's National Party won the popular vote, whereas the Jamaica Labour Party won more councillors. So that was reflective of that 1% immediately conducted. That survey was immediately conducted before the parish council elections. Since then, by virtue of the wave of support which the People's National Party got during the parish council elections, when we did the poll in April, the People's National Party had gained 7 percentage points. Fast forward to the party conference in September, and that moved up to 9 percentage points. Again, what we're seeing is a momentum with the People's National Party, which, again, based on these numbers that we're looking at now for the last poll, that has dampened a bit. 5 percentage points, but the trend is a key factor. The trend is the greatest predictor of the outcome of an election.
So when you said trend in this case, what's the trend?
Well, the trend leading up to 2020 was obvious.
Right.
Between 2020 and 2022, pretty obvious. Between 2024 and now, the trend has favored the People's National Party, despite the fall off of 5 percentage points roughly in the recently concluded poll.
All right, so I can expect then a hard-fought campaign.
Well, I think it is shaping up to be. I mean, I don't recall a campaign being so long. I mean, it has started several months ago, and it is continuing, and I expect it to be an intensely fought campaign.
All right, I know we'll be talking to you again many, many times, Don. I appreciate your time, as always. Let's take the break. When we come back, we'll be hearing from the parties themselves, so stay with us. We'll soon come.